Hello, my name is Quentin Martin, and I'll be doing a fanfic reading called Spiders and Magic Rise of Spider-Man by Maximus Reborn. Chapter 1 Unwanted Second Chance. Dark days lie ahead for the center of the web. Within a dark room, an old woman sat in an unusually large chair, a crimson blindfold over her eyes, matching silk dress over her little body. Large strands of webbing surrounded the entire room, moving images of different Spider-Man and Spider-Woman contained in different sections. Extending her hand, a small orb materialized and revealed an image of the Spider-Man of her universe, Peter Parker. The image faded, morphing into another. With his mask torn, Spider-Man fell to a knee before Dr. Octopus, Kraven the Hunter, Electro, Vulture, Shocker, and hovering above it all was the Green Goblin. Norman's manic delight at Spider-Man's imminent demise overshadowed that of any of his compatriots. It was obvious even through the twisted facade of his mask. In a bright flash of light, the orb disappeared from sight before the end of the vision could play out. Madam Web shifted her head in the direction of one of the strands of webbing. Peter's image could be seen within, but it broke away from its position, floating gracefully in the air. Instead of reaching the floor, the strand whipped around and placed itself upon a new spot in the web. Madam Web's brow furrowed. As watcher of the web, she had seen many things, even 4 different Spider-Men in one locale at the same time. Yet, in all her wisdom, she could not believe the fate that awaited Spider-Man. Energy spiraled near her lap, transforming into a book. Madam Web turned her attention to Peter's strand of webbing. A new image formed inside, causing the woman to nod her head. There was hope yet. With a flick of the wrist, the book disappeared from sight. It was time for the Spider-Man to embark on a journey and fulfill his destiny as the greatest hero in history. In a land far away. Twilight awoke to a sound of her alarm clock ringing in her ear, and the sun gleamed in her face, eyes fluttering. She smiled and slowly pulled herself from the bed. After stopping the alarm clock, more asleep than awake, the mare lazily started to get ready for the day in her normal pattern. Twilight heard the alarm again, her ears twitching at the sound. As the mare's mind cleared further, she realized that the alarm clock had never sounded quite like that before. Spike? She grumbled, slowly plodding back to her room to rectify the problem, only to see her dazed dragon at the window. She walked over to him and asked, "Why would you do that to me? You know that I—" Her words died in her throat once she reached the window. "Twilight!" Spike called out, running over to the mare's side. He stopped in his tracks, slack-jawed, as his eyes fell on the image behind the window. Whoa! Explosions roared outside, causing the interior of her home to shake violently. She could see terrified ponies running around, and finally understood that her alarm was actually singing back up to their screams. Twilight's rude awakening was completed when she finally saw the source of all the chaos. A dragon, its large, black, scaly frame covering the village like an ominous cloud, and its beady golden eyes served as a false beacon of light in that same darkness. Twilight shook her head, recollecting her senses. "Spike, send a letter to Princess Celestia." Spike stumbled over to her side, leaning up against the table to maintain a standing position through the quakes as he frantically scribbled a message onto the paper. He held up a scroll before blowing a jade flame over it, but the letter remained in his claw, earning a baffled expression from the dragon. Twilight's brow furrowed. "It won't go through? That can't be right. Try it again." "Okay," Spike stammered, blowing a small ember into the scroll, but the result was the same, leaving the dragon to frantically shake his head. Another explosion roared from outside, sending a more potent tremor through the tree berry. Spike lost his footing, stumbling until he fell against the nearest wall. What are we going to do? Twilight recoiled as tremors coursed through the library. Spike lost his balance, clinging to a shelf for support. But it was for naught, the baby dragon slipping onto his side. Twilight watched the dragon smash another 5 houses with his massive tail before moving further into Ponyville, creating an ever broader path of decimation. She knew there would be nothing left for it to smash in short order if nothing was done. Twilight paced across the room, tossing aside each book that failed to help her. Suddenly she found herself sprawled on the floor, stomach in the air, hooves failing for support. A quick teleport later, and she was in time to brace for another shockwave. The dragon's rampage was getting closer. The mayor shook her head. I don't know. If my letter can't reach Princess Celestia, there must be too much magical interference in the area. That dragon is much bigger than any I ever seen. Something isn't right about all this. Twilight rushed back to an assortment of books resting on her desk, and she pulled one from underneath the group, causing the others to fall across the floor. I don't know what's causing it, but I have to do something. There is no telling what that dragon might do if I don't. Why did this happen? A direct attack from a dragon on a village had never been recorded before. If anything, they tend to avoid contact with ponies altogether. However, there was a reason for this, as well as why Twilight couldn't get in contact with Princess Celestia. There had to be foul play involved. Before she could look for a glimmer of hope in the book's pages, another tremor ensued and caused Twilight to lean against her desk for support. She had turned her head away for a moment to steal a quick glance at the dragon outside, but in that short time, the book she had carried had suddenly vanished, with another taking its place. Once the mayor turned her attention back to the book, she wasted no time opening it, unaware of the change that had occurred. Her violet eyes shifted through the pages, widening at the sight of a notable passage. What is this? The greatest hero in history? He says to have saved countless lives and fought the most dangerous beings across the universe. Wait! This is a summoning spell! Spike ran to her side with a look of concern in his eyes. Summoning spell? Do you really think that's safe? I don't think you've ever done that before. What if something happens? I know, Spike, but every pony is in danger. I have to take the risk. Once her body glowed with a bright violet energy and her pupils disappeared, she focused all of her power into the spell. Energy glowed from her horn, and soon after the book levitated from its position, shining brightly. Twilight's eyes shot open before the magical energy shorted out, causing the book to erupt with a bright flash of light. I just pray it will be enough. Swinging across the skies of New York on a strand of webbing, Spider-Man groaned underneath his mask. The city folk had been relatively rude today, calling him every foul word in their normal repertoire, along with a slew of creative additions as well. He had missed his math class for the 3rd time this week, and to top it off, Jameson had given him yet another lousy paycheck. Spider-Man shook his head and exhaled. His dual life was taking its toll, and he was losing patience at an astonishing rate. He would return a woman her purse only to be insulted and pepper sprayed. In fact, he had just saved a homeless man only to be thanked by an attempt to pelt him with whatever they could throw as he left by other people. Peter groaned. Should I just stop being Spider-Man? I mean, no one would miss me. I can't blame them. But after what happened to Captain Stacy and Gwen. He threw himself from his webbing and proceeded to glide momentarily. The sensation of weightlessness normally gave him a few seconds of peace, but this time It eluded him. He shot another strand of webbing at the last second and swung before releasing it again. As he continued, however, he felt like the mundane task was slowly becoming more onerous the longer he kept swinging. I really want to make you proud, Uncle Ben. I don't think I can do this any longer. And as those words were swept away by the rushing wind, he was suddenly engulfed by a violent energy. He felt light floating adrift as his vision was compromised by a bright light. The energy eventually dissipated, allowing Peter's sight to return. However, something that had not diminished was his momentum, which led to hit a headfirst collision with a bookshelf. The shelf teetered before falling forward, flattening the young man in the process. Spider-Man groaned underneath the wreckage. A few moments passed before he gained his bearings and tossed the heavy furniture to the side. Peter rubbed his hand over the back of his aching cranium. Every time I turn around, it's always something. But it's not every day I materialize into someone's room. Just once I would like to have a normal day in my stupid crazy life. What the heck is that? Spike blurted out, pointing at the bipedal creature. Spider-Man turned and immediately yelped at the sight of a purple pony with a tiny scaly creature by its side. He shook his head madly. What the heck am I? What the heck are you? Snapping his head back and forth, Spider-Man attempted to gather his surroundings, but failed miserably. Better yet, where am I? Equestria, Twilight hesitantly said, causing the young man to yelp once again. I summoned you here. Her eyes remained wide, the strange creature's bizarre image leaving her mind with a plethora of questions. What is this? Unsure what to make of the situation, the unicorn forwarded her brow. Where are you from? And what are you exactly? Tilting his head to the side, Spider-Man stared at the pony for what seemed like minutes. Did that horse just talk to me? He muttered, the idea too far-fetched to take seriously. Fortunately, memories of one of his latest adventures reminded him that weird circumstances were bound to occur in his life. Placing his hand over his forehead, Peter sighed inwardly. I saw a cartoon pig version of myself once. A talking pony is rather normal compared to that. A lot more tolerable, too. I mean, she is kind of cute for a violet pony with large girly eyes. And what am I thinking? Focus! Nodding, Spider-Man turned to the pony and shrugged. Okay, so I know I'm not losing my mind or humoring any hallucinations. Whichever comes first, you ask where I'm from and what I am. Well, despite my awesome sense of fashion, may I suggest I'm just a human from Earth? He looked around, analyzing his surroundings. Please, tell me, I'm just in an alternate dimension or something. Twilight glanced to the side, retreating into the confines of her mind for any recollection regarding the given location. After several moments, her eyes sprung open at a late realization. Earth? Human? I never heard of anything like those. The fact that you're bipedal is unusual, but... Closing her eyes, Twilight frowned. You are not physically and scientifically possible. The talking horse is telling me I don't exist. I don't know whether I should be terrified or insulted. Spider-Man scratched the back of his head. Where I come from, a lot of things defy the term impossible. I'm getting off topic though. Why did you bring me here in the first place? Please tell me it's so we can practice our chimichanga. I can never learn that properly. My chimmy can never match the changa, if you know what I mean. Twilight shook her head, her bewilderment evident. Focus. What are you talking about? Before she could begin to explain the situation at hand, another tremor shook the room to its core. knocking Twilight off her hooves and staggering Spider-Man to a knee. She focused over to the window and pushed the curtains open. Twilight turned and motioned for Spider-Man to join her, causing the young man to promptly obey. His mask lenses shot open at the sight of the colossal dragon outside. Twilight pointed her hoof. That dragon is close to destroying our home. I was desperate and performed the summoning spell that would bring the world's greatest hero here. Spider-Man slapped his forehead. I wanted to get away from home, but this isn't what I had in mind. Shrugging his shoulders, Spider-Man felt a twinge of guilt take over. I don't mind helping, but I'm the greatest? That's wrong on so many levels. I'm not great in the slightest. You must have misread the spell. No, I know you messed up somewhere. I know you can find someone 11 times better than me. I know this guy that does some nice work with a hammer. Maybe you can summon him instead. There's this nutcase with claws that go on about how he does the best thing. He's the best there is at what he does, too. Better yet, why not summon, another horse from this world? I mean, you clearly didn't plan this out. Twilight slammed her hoof into the ground. Look, I was desperate. There's a dragon destroying everything. Innocent ponies are in danger. And I didn't know what else to do. She barked, her voice cracking. If I could go out there and fight the dragon myself, but I can't with all the magical influence in this area. I was lucky I was able to summon you in the first place. Her voice wavered, a sign of her diminishing nerve. Twilight shook her head. I know it's dangerous, but I need you to do something. I might be able to counter whatever is blocking my magic, but I'll need you to buy me time. I promise I'll send you back when this is all said and done. Just please. Exasperated, Spider-Man threw his hands up defensively. Every time I turn around, this is so weird. But okay, I'll help you. I punched T-Rex once, so maybe this won't be so different. He jumped across the room and landed in front of some large double doors. He paused as a thought occurred to him. What's your name, by the way? Her ears perked up as she stammered about. I'm sorry, I forgot my manners. My name's Twilight Sparkle. What is yours? He shook his head disapprovingly. Poindexter, but call me Spider-Man. His brow furrowing underneath his mask. The young man let out an irritated groan before leaping out of the window. Magical talking ponies and killer dragons. This is Spider-Ham and the Savage Land all over again. Oh well, this day can't possibly get any weirder. Once the strangely garbed being was out of the hearing range, Spike turned to Twilight with a worried look. Do you think he can do it? He doesn't really seem heroic. The mayor's brow furrowed. He does come off as a bit underwhelming, but he's the best chance we have for survival. Twilight's mouth quivered before slowly shutting. I'll work hard to find a spell just in case something happens. I'm not sure, Twilight. I mean, is it safe for him to run around? What will every pony say? He paused, the muscles in his body growing cold suddenly. What will Princess Celestia say about this? She didn't respond right away, resisting the urge to swallow the lump in her throat. I'm not sure, but I'm more worried about every pony else. I'll deal with that when the time comes. She grimaced. I hope I won't be scolded for this. On the other side of the village, Spider-Man continued to sprint, leaping from one rooftop to another. You know, I'm taking this rather well. I was just pulled into an alternate dimension and volunteered to save a bunch of ponies from a giant dragon. He flipped over a chimney, landing on the side of the wall of the nearest building. Is it wrong that I still find Squirrel Girl and Deadpool weirder on all accounts? I swear, I think I lost my marbles years ago, and I'm only now realizing how weird my life is. He crouched and jumped high into the air, extending his hand out to shoot his webbing onto the side wall of the clock tower. He released the strand and performed a front dive, managing to land perfectly on a tree stump. Help! The voice brought Spider-Man's attention to the other side of the village, where he saw a Pegasus with a pink mane and ocean blue eyes, running in his direction. Unfortunately, closing in on her tail was a claw nearly twice her size. Spider-Man sprinted toward the commotion, leaping forward and shifting his body. Peter whisked the pony away before the dragon could claim his prize. With his arm wrapped around her, he continued to sprint, while the thunderous footsteps of the dragon quickened, signaling its pursuit. The young pony watched in bewilderment, gasping with every leap her savior took. Fluttershy glanced up at the beam to say something, but her nerve slipped the moment she saw his blank, bug-like lenses. His figure clearly indicated that he was not a pony, with his fingers, thumbs, and lack of a tail. Before Fluttershy could think further into the subject, the dragon took a wild swing, but Spider-Man dove underneath the blow and clutched the mare tighter, never losing a step. The dragon inhaled deeply, causing Peter's spider sense to blare inside his head. He turned to see flames shimmering inside the dragon's mouth before shifting his gaze to the wings on her back. Spider-Man panted. "Excuse me, miss." The pony slow to respond, her mind struggling to keep up with the current situation. I'm Fluttershy. Fluttershy, can you fly?" She closed her eyes and shook her head. "Oh, yes, but..." "Then fly like the wind," Spider-Man roared, planting his feet before throwing the Pegasus as hard as he could manage. Fluttershy shrieked, her frame soaring through the air, but her wings instinctively flapped, giving the mare flight. Turning around, Spider-Man fired a ray of webbing at his target. The gossamer flew right into the dragon's eyes, causing it to clutch at its face and stop in its tracks. With a front flip, Spider-Man landed on the roof of the nearest building. "Sorry, I'm pressed for time. Hurry and get out of here while you still can." As she hovered, Fluttershy's large eyes filled with concern. "What? No, I can't." Before she could respond, the dragon snatched the webbing from his face and snarled at the sight of Spider-Man. It inhaled deeply, mustering up as much breath as it could, and exhaled a massive ball of fire at its target. Spider-Man jumped away from the building and landed on top of a smaller one, narrowly avoiding the trail of fire that burned away several buildings in his path. "Make like a tree and leave already." Fluttershy's eyes filled with tears, though she had only known him for a few moments. She didn't want to see the strange being get hurt. Slamming her eyes shut, she chose to respect his wishes and flew in the opposite direction of the village. Spider-Man grinned. "Bossing around talking ponies. I've lost my mind." And loaded the Deadpool. The dragon's eyes followed the Pegasus and prepared to give chase, but Spider-Man shot a strand of webbing under its mouth. The dragon shook his head, attempting to lose the pest, but Spider-Man maintained his grip, managing to flip high over his head before landing perfectly on the dragon's muzzle. Its claw hand rose and smashed down, but Spider-Man backflipped and avoided the attack, leaving the dragon to smack itself accidentally. Once Spider-Man landed on his feet, he crouched and shot webbing into the dragon's eye at point-blank range. He didn't stop until the majority of the dragon's head was wrapped in webbing. The dragon swung about madly, desperate to see again, but Spider-Man landed and ran between its legs. That should keep him busy long enough for me to get everyone out of the village. Peter cut across the nearest corner, and almost immediately he found a large pile of masonry near a destroyed house. He groaned at the sight. I just have to hurry and save any bystanders. Wait! A gruff yet feminine voice caused him to stop in his tracks and turn to the rubble. His eyes widened at the hint of sky blue near the bottom of the pile. He walked over, his fears confirmed at the sight of a pony. Her rainbow-patterned mane showed most of her face, but her pleading large, light violet eyes could still be seen. Spider-Man placed his hands underneath the base of the rubble. Taking a deep breath, he lifted the masonry off of the mare with one arm, giving her enough time to crawl out from underneath the debris. The second he released the rock, she flew into the air. Thanks, I really didn't need your help, but... The pony's mouth fell agape once her eyes finally settled on the bizarre-looking being. She stepped back, holding her hooves up defensively. Okay, who are you, and what are you supposed to be? A friend, Spider-Man simply stated, stepping back to glance at the dragon. It ripped some more of the webbing from his face before roaring at the top of his lungs. Spider-Man scuffled, but his lenses widened once he spotted several ponies galloping past the dragon's position. Shaking his head, Peter faced the Pegasus by his side and pointed at the bystanders. Think you could help me evacuate the rest of the village while I do what I can here? The Pegasus glared at the bipedal creature. What do you think you are? You're not the boss of me. Besides, I want a rematch. That stupid dragon sucker punched me. I need some payback. Spider-Man shook his head. No way. You only get yourself killed. Think about the others first. Who do you think you are? Rainbow spatted, but the being didn't give her time to argue, sprinting toward the dragon at full speed. Exhaling, the mare flew above the crowd and motioned for them to escape. She swooped in and took a filly in her hooves, scoffing as the bipedal creature flipped over the dragon's claw. Whatever he is, guess he's right. I have to help my friends first. Flipping to a vertical base, Peter lowered his body into a defensive stance, but he spotted something out of the corner of his eye. A gray pony, a Pegasus to be exact, and stood in front of a burning house, pacing uncontrollably by the flaming door. Spider-Man jumped to the nearest rooftop of a building and, using his webbings, slingshot himself to the dragon's head. With all of his momentum, he delivered a swift kick to the side of his jaw, managing to send the dragon tumbling to the ground. With the dragon further distracted, Spider-Man rushed over to the cottage, landing next to the distressed pony. What are you doing? You need to get out of here. Didn't your mom ever tell you not to play with fire? He said, holding his arms out to the side where the dragon was struggling to sit up. Or giant killer dragons? Paying the man's words no mind, the pony gaze remained firmly centered on the burning house. I'm sorry, but some pony's still inside. She'll burn alive if no pony does something. While the blonde mare watched the scene, Spider-Man shifted his attention to the wall of flames surrounding the door. That right? I'll get her out. You get out of the village while you can. But it's really dangerous. You shouldn't. The mare turned to face the individual finally, but she found nothing in his place. Her brow forward before her eyes shot open at the sound of a glass shattering coming from above her position. She yelped, realizing that whoever she had been talking to jumped into the flame-ridden building. The Pegasus threw her hooves high over her head, but Rainbow Dash soared through the sky before landing next to her. Derpy, what are you doing? We need to go. Think he's worried about you, she exclaimed, grabbing the mare by the hoof. She looked at the fire, its flames roaring from the building, but the Pegasus followed Rainbow Dash without hesitation, the safety of her daughter proving more important. However, Derpy could only wonder who was foolish enough to try such a stunt. Meanwhile, shards of glass scattered in every direction, covering the floor and some of his costume. "Hey, where are you?" Spider-Man screamed, hopeful that the worst hadn't already transpired. "There's some pony upstairs. Please help." Spider-Man rushed to the stairs and jumped to the bottom, but he gasped out loud at the sight he had barged in on. 3-foot flames were scattered throughout the entire floor. A pony sat helplessly in the corner, huddled against the wall with her eyes shut. Her violet mane resembled Twilight's, and her coat reminded her of the paleness of the moon, and shone just as brightly. Before he could call out to her, she collapsed. Pieces of the ceiling fell, but missed her slender frame by a few inches. The flames drew closer to her and grew in height. Spider-Man hurtled over the first flame in his path, bounding to the wall over a second wall of flame. But a piece of falling flaming rubble threatened to crush him at the same moment. He performed a front flip, dodged the rubble, and landed feet first on the ceiling. With one final leap, he landed next to the unicorn. Spider-Man lifted her body and placed the pony gently onto his back. However, his sixth sense for danger began to ring once again. Before he could progress, he jumped across the room and stepped in front of the nearest window. He glanced through the room and stopped at the sight of the stepping stool. He shot his webbing at the stool and threw it out the window in a spray of broken glass before following it outside. Never losing his momentum, Spider-Man made his way to the outskirts of the village across the rooftops, what few remained anyway. Once he had landed safely, Rainbow Dash approached him. "Ah, good. You're safe. I need a favor. Think you can help her?" he questioned, shifting his head to the snow-white unicorn on his back. At the sight of her friend on Spider-Man's shoulder, Rainbow Dash gasped. "Rarity! Is she?" "She's fine. I think she's just unconscious." He walked over to the mayor's side and gently placed Rarity on her back. However, she shuffled in her sleep, opening her azure eyes lazily. She stared at Spider-Man for a few moments before her lips curled in a frown. "My word, that outfit is horrendously tacky," she whispered before succumbing to unconsciousness once again. Spider-Man rolled her eyes underneath his mask and exhaled. "For the love of... why does everyone talk crap about my costume?" He turned his gaze to Rainbow Dash. "I need you to get out of here." "But what about you?" "I'll be fine. What's important is that you take care of everyone for me, okay?" He shrugged. "Now get out of here." Rainbow Dash tried to protest, but Spider-Man jumped away and shot a strand of webbing onto the side of the clock tower and swung back into the village. Her eyes filled with worry, but she ignored her negative thoughts and flew deep into the forest. "I hope he'll be okay." Spider-Man flipped high into the air before landing on the highest available building next to the clock tower. "Great. Now it's just me and him," he said confidently, with a spring in his step. However, the dragon snatched the webbing from his eyes again and let out a soul-piercing roar. It showed its fangs and glared intently at Spider-Man. The sight caused a shiver to run up Peter's spine, and his confidence took a nosedive into oblivion. Great. Now it's just me and him. The dragon lunged forward, but Spider-Man rolled to the side, managing to avoid being crushed by his attacker's weight. Before the dragon could recover, Peter dove forward with his fists held back as far as possible. With all his strength, he could easily knock the dragon out in a single punch. He neared his target, prepared to deliver the coup de grace, but the muscles in his body locked up, causing the man to inadvertently stopping his tracks. His body shook uncontrollably, forcing Spider-Man to clutch at his side. Unfortunately, Before he could recollect his senses, the dragon reared back and struck, sending the man flying into a nearby wall. Embedded within the structure, Spider-Man pried himself free before the dragon's tail whipped by, destroying the area. What the heck is wrong with me? Peter jumped from one rooftop to the next before leaping forward and striking the dragon's stomach with both of his feet. I should have at least slowed this guy down by now, but he flipped through the air, avoiding the dragon's attempt to crush him into the ground, and proceeded to stomp his hands. I think I'm losing my strength somehow. Spider-Man took into the air, ready to leap away, but the dragon used his free hand to snatch him out of mid-air and toss him across the village. His body flew helplessly for several moments before it crashed through the window, slid across the marble floor, and bounced off a cabinet, causing its plates to fall around his frame. You know, just once I'd like to be summoned to an island filled with lonely supermodels instead of anything that's willing to kill me. A cupcake teetered off the edge of a pan right above Peter, pulling the lower half of his mask up. He reached out and took the treat in his hand. The ponies can cook here too? I have to be a hit at the local circus back on Earth. His mouth watered, ready to perform a taste test on the delicious morsel, but his spider sense interrupted his train of thought. Peter peeked up and winced at the sight of a large yellow pupil locked on him through the window. Hey, this is mine. Get your own. Spider-Man flipped to his feet, took the pan and threw it at the dragon's eye, narrowly missing it. Screaming out in pain, the dragon brought his claws over his head. Peter scoffed, finally taking a bite out of the cupcake. Man, these ponies cook as good as Aunt May, he chuckled. Spider-Man jumped out of the house, landing by the remnants of a house, a small section of stone wall to be exact. He peeked up at the dragon standing over him, its attention still on his aching eye, and came up with an idea. He aimed his hands at the wall, spinning several strands of webbing around it, but making sure to not cut off his ends. He took a few steps back, straining until the webbing stretched to its limit. I would say, let's rock, but that pun is so beneath me, he muttered before a smirk formed on his face. But I'll say it anyway. Let's rock! Planting his feet, Spider-Man jerked his wrist until the wall was pried free from the ground. He swung the debris around like a lasso, screaming as he released his strand and set the webbed-together wall airborne into the side of the dragon's head. The impact caused the dragon to stagger back before it fell onto a house behind it, sending shards of wood and masonry all across the village. Spider-Man landed on the dragon's stomach and glanced at the scattered debris around him. Well, there goes the neighborhood. Now do me and these good ponies a favor. Stand still while I deliver the coup de grace. That same instant, the dragon wrapped its claw hand around Spider-Man's entire body, with the exception of his head and neck. It reared the man closer to get a close-up with its swollen eye. Peter chuckled at first, but once the dragon roared, he could only let out a small set of whimpers. Spider-Man groaned. Stupid. My life sucks more than a vacuum. I get summoned to another world by a horse, and now I'm about to get killed by a dragon? He attempted to squirm free, only to exhale once the dragon tightened its grip on him. This is not how I expected things to end. Hopefully that pony will come up with a spell any second now, and this weird experience will become just another moment in my bizarre life. Then I can sleep this off and forget this ever happened. Right? The dragon snarled even louder, turning Peter's skin as white as snow. Right? The dragon's roar ended abruptly with a low laughter replacing it. Peter's mask lens widened at the sound. You are wrong, little one. The dragon growled in a deep voice. Twilight Sparkle will not be able to save you now. Spider-Man shook his head and tried to squirm free, but the dragon's grip was too firm. Okay, first of all, Darth Vader called. He wanted his voice back. He continued his struggle, managing to free one of his hands. Second, I'm just visiting. You couldn't have timed this any worse. Third, what creep do you work for? Fourth, how do you know about her? And fifth, can we have a do-over? I'm kind of going through a power failure at the moment. Let me recharge my batteries and we'll partake in something more friendly. How does musical chair sound? Or dragon snorted, blowing Spider-Man's head back. You are an annoying one. Really? I always thought I was the life of the party. Spider-Man shrugged, causing the dragon's eye to twitch involuntarily. Seriously? Can you put me down? I'm growing lightheaded. The dragon snarled, tightening his grip on Peter. You are lucky that my master told me you only wanted to spread terror instead of death today. Otherwise your life would have already been extinguished. His entire body was going limp. Spider-Man exhaled. Duly noted. The dragon reared its claw back, prepared to end this battle, but a flash of light erupted from underneath his feet. Its body began to slowly fade away into the night, much like a ghost would. Its fanged mouth formed a wicked smile. It's a shame I can't stay longer, but don't worry. You'll be seeing me again, and then I will have no restraints on my actions. Peter groaned. Would you like to make a reservation then? Go on, make your jokes. If you're the best Twilight Sparkle could find, my master will have no problem reaching his goals. He will not be reconciled to defeat a third time by Equestrian's guardians. Its wicked smile widened, especially since a path to the elements of magic's defeat has been discovered. His brow furrowed underneath his mask. Element? I don't even know magic was an element. I think you need to study the periodic table again. It's hydrogen, helium, lithium. Silence! The dragon roared, tightening his grip until a snap echoed through the vicinity. Spider-Man screamed before his head lowered, his body going limp. The individual subdued in his grasp. The dragon allowed a fanged smile to form on his face. Tell the ponies my master wishes them the best of luck. They'll need it. An awkward silence filled the space around the two, but it ended once the dragon threw Peter as hard as he could before his body completely vanished from existence. Spider-Man's body flew across the skies of Ponyville and through the outskirts of the Everfree Forest until he crashed into the lake, causing a splash as high as the trees to erupt from its surface. His head spun upon impact, causing his eyes to roll into the back of his head. He tried to move his muscles, but he remained still. He was only able to make his hands flutter in a weak, rowing motion, a sure sign that his powers, his super strength, had long left him. His thoughts raced, trying to piece his crumbling mind back together. His consciousness continued to slip, and he slowly started to breathe in the water around him. His senses were numb, unable to register anything. He was drowning, but he couldn't even react to it. It felt as though death had only embraced Spider-Man to give the hero a well-deserved rest. He had already failed his uncle and former lover. Spider-Man couldn't bear the thought of failing someone he had just met, who had placed so much blind faith into him. The death of this failure would come in a calm, relaxed, gentle manner. No last few seconds of life in the sadistic grasp of some supervillain. It lacked the few seconds of fear that destroyed all other thoughts when faced with an inescapable death blow. It was almost too good for him. Peter finally surrendered to his subconsciousness realization as his body steadily sank into the cold depths of the lake. However, a silhouette approached him from above and hovered over his limp frame. Peter watched her golden hair flow gracefully with the flow of the water, and the sun's light reflected off her large green eyes, despite the darkness of the water around them. She pulled him over her shoulder and paddled to the surface with surprising speed. Once they reached the surface, she gasped for breath and peered back at her passenger. Y'all okay there, partner?" Peter attempted to respond, but water escaped from his mouth, forcing him to cough out the rest. "No," he muttered, allowing his head to rest completely against the pony's golden mane. She chuckled. "Nah, I reckon you wouldn't be. Fluttershy told me you were fighting that dragon back there in the village by yourself. I don't know whether to call you brave or crazy. I don't know if it's the brain trauma, but I didn't hear a word you just said," he said to himself, but loud enough for the mare to hear. She peered back, prompting Peter to glance up and admire the snow-white freckles on her face. "It's okay. I heard you saved my friends, Rarity and Rainbow Dash. That's awfully brave of you. I'm Applejack, by the way." "Applejacks? But it's too late for cereal. Sorry, Miss Talking Pony. I'm gonna take a nap now," he muttered, finally passing out from exhaustion. The mare turned around, but a blue streak in the sky brought her gaze skyward. Rainbow Dash slipped through the trees, slowing to a hover once she was a few feet away from Applejack. "Is he okay?" Applejack shot her head. "I doubt it. The fellow took a nasty fall. I managed to fish him out of the lake, but we need to get him some medical attention." Concern filled her eyes. "What about the village? Is that dragon still running amok?" "That's the weird thing. There's no sign of him. It's as if he's completely disappeared." Both ponies shared a glance before Applejack shifted her shoulders and peered back at the masked man. "Well, I reckon we should be grateful for whatever our friend did. Her bro forward. I don't mention to point out the obvious, but what exactly is this fella?" "Applejack! Rainbow Dash!" a voice called out and echoed through the forest. Rainbow Dash's ears perked. Twilight, is that you?" Galloping through the forest, Twilight brushed through an assortment of tree limbs, and stopped between Rainbow Dash and Applejack. She paused, her violet eyes softening at the sight of the bipedal creature on Applejack's shoulders. But she regained her nerve and frowned. "Girls, it's urgent. Princess Celestia has summoned us. Fluttershy, Rarity, and Pinkie Pie are already on their way to meet with her now." "Hold your horses there, Twilight," Applejack blurted out, playing her hoof down right after. "What about this fellow on my back? We can't just leave him here. He needs to see a doctor. I can barely feel him breathing." "We aren't leaving him," Twilight replied. She turned, swallowing the lump that had formed in her throat, and closed her eyes. "Princess Celestia wants to see him too." Before any pony could react, Peter's body glowed with crimson energy before exploding in a bright flash of energy. Applejack slammed her eyes shut, bracing herself for impact, but her emerald irises opened when she noted the absence of any damage. She glanced around aimlessly, trying to figure out what had happened exactly. However, Rainbow Dash and Twilight's agape jaws caught the blonde's attention. She followed their lines of sight, turned her head to the man on her back. But something was wrong, evident by the horror that filled Applejack's eyes as well. His form had changed drastically, matching the mares standing around him. A horn protruded from his forehead, managing to tear his mask slightly, and allowed his mane to escape. The same happened with his newly formed tail. Somehow, some way, the man had transformed into a pony. As the mares around Peter panicked at the sudden change, someone else was unconcerned with Spider-Man's current problem. Madam Web calmly viewed the situation, and once again peered into the web. Peter's ears twitched slightly as her warning got through to some small part of his brain. "Spider-Man, your greatest trial begins now," As soon as her brief warning was uttered, she nodded her head, caused the orb to disappear, and redirected her attention to the surrounding web.